Well, we're back with the Grom this week, and the good news is I have a full tank, but the bad news is I don't actually have a full tank. So a little bit of backstory on this, and I'm curious to see if those of you that are watching that have Honda Groms have experienced this as well. But over the last year and a half or so, I've noticed that the fuel level on the dashboard of the Honda Grom is wildly inaccurate. It would show full tank for probably like 80, 90 miles, and then after it got past 90 into like 100, 110, then it would start to show like a half tank, give or take. And when I was showing about a half tank or just under a half tank, that was my indication that it was basically empty. And if I'm honest, I didn't give it that much thought. I just figured, okay, it's just being a little optimistic, if anything like that. But the other day I was riding around and I noticed something. So I reset that trip meter every time I fill up. It's been 138.6 miles, almost 140 miles, and let's actually see what's going on in here. That's just splashing at the very bottom. Yikes. Thankfully the gas station is only like less than a mile down the road, so I think I can make it there and definitely fill this thing up and see what has to be done about this fuel sender. Pretty sure the capacity on the Grom is 1.3 gallons. That's probably the biggest fill up I've ever had. And yes, it's expensive, I know. Rip. So now I gotta look at this fuel gauge thing, but now I've filled the tank up completely with fuel, and it's probably better to have an empty tank. I don't want to drain it, so let's just ride it. Ride this thing around, empty the tank, and then we'll see what we can find. Which leads us to today. I have ran this bike as much as I'm willing to empty it on just riding it around. So next steps are going to be getting into the tank, draining everything out, pulling it out, and actually seeing what the fuel sensor, the fuel pump, everything, that whole assembly looks like. But before I do that, I actually want to show you something that I came across while I was riding it around. So I was taking a look at this gas tank as I was riding around and just wanted to see what I could see on like a half tank, 3/4 tank, all that good stuff. And what you can see in there at the very bottom with that little bit of wire sticking out, that is the fuel level sender. If I take my magnetic little thingy and we grab it, look at that. I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be attached to something. That is my issue. That thing is broken, some piece of plastic snapped maybe, or I'm hoping that it just came apart and that I can just snap it back in place. That's the ideal scenario anyway. So we're gonna go ahead and take all the plastics and the gas tank itself off so we can get that fuel pump out of there. So I got all the body panels off and the tank is just about to come out, but first I need to disconnect a couple of things. First thing is the fuel line. That's that black piece right there with that clear tab. We'll pull that clear tab and then pop the whole thing off. And then behind it, we have the electrical connector. Again, pretty simple, just pull the tab and it'll pop right out. All right, now we're looking at the bottom of the gas tank and it looks pretty simple to get into here. Just need 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts and this whole thing should come out pretty easily. That's super easy to get out. Now let's actually take a look at it in detail, see what's broken. Wow, did I luck out with this. I was expecting broken plastic or loose sensor, broken sensor, anything like that, but it's actually not the case. This is the fuel pump assembly, and this portion right here, which is separate, is the fuel level sender. So as you can see, it has this floaty bit right here, and then when it's attached, as it normally should be, it'll show you on the dashboard up here for a full tank and then down here for an empty tank. And as you can see right here, connects with 1, 2, 3 tabs that just snap into place on this portion right here. And I figured because it was a part that it had snapped and one of these was going to be missing, but they're all intact. For whatever reason, it just fell off, or maybe it was always off, who knows? You know, one of the other things that I was thinking about as I was riding around to burn all the gas out was that why isn't it just showing an empty tank at all time? Why is it always a full tank? If this thing is just dangling in here and the whole unit is just floating on the surface, why wouldn't it just always show an empty tank? But when I pulled everything out, I found that what had happened was that it flipped itself over and was kind of dangling like this. So if it's upside down, obviously, flip side, it's always going to show a full tank. So that explains that. So it being the ideal scenario, all I got to do is just snap this thing into a place and we'll reinstall. Another thing I noticed really quickly here is that these 2 wires that go to the level sensor are actually sticking out just ever so slightly. I don't know if that actually has any impact on it, like maybe it wasn't fully connected, but I'm just gonna go ahead and seat those in there 100%. But now that's fully in place, let's just reverse the process. I'm gonna clean up the surface and put everything back in, tighten it up, and let's put it back on the bike and see, hopefully, fingers crossed, that it shows me an empty tank now that I actually have an empty tank. All right, before we go any further, let's see what happens if I turn this thing on. Now, obviously, a lot of the gas that was in the fuel pump leaked out when I was putting it back in. My guess is that when I turn this on, the fuel pump might make a little bit longer of a noise than it usually does when you turn the key, but maybe we'll cycle it a couple of times, and then we'll check, of course, the fuel level to see where it's at, because it's reading empty right now, and it should be reading empty. Oh, look at that, it's empty. Perfect. And I wonder, actually, I'm gonna grab my metal thingy and see if I can actually manipulate it to show me a full tank. Okay, I think I got a hold of it. If we pull it up, look at that. I did it. Now it's showing 2 bars. Nice. All right, it took a few seconds, but now it's back down to empty, showing empty now that I've dropped it. Nice, this will work. Excellent. Now, ultimate test, we will fill up the tank yet again, see that it gives me a full tank, and then we'll see if it actually gives me periodic fuel level increments that I expect, rather than just the hopeful optimism of a full tank all the time. All right, drink up, little guy. By the way, for those of you that are outside of California but come here to complain about our pumps, this is how you do it. It's not that hard. 1.296 gallons. Didn't exactly use up as much as I did the other day. Wow, look at that. Right off the bat, full tank. Now the best part of this is just to ride around, empty that tank, and watch the little bars just fall down. Taking a little pit stop at the stadium. Now, obviously I haven't gone that far, 7.8 miles, so yeah, it's still showing a full tank. I wouldn't expect any different, but I want to make sure that everything is still going on well down here so that nothing is leaking, and hopefully that I don't catch on fire, because that would be bad. So taking a look at the fuel tank from this side, looks pretty dry. Again, from the other side, looks pretty dry. Nothing dripping on the engine, which is good, and nothing dripping on the ground, even better. Well, 34 miles later, and we're still showing a full tank. Now, I did the math in my head, because there's 6 bars, 140 miles roughly to a tank, which means every bar should roughly equate to 23 1/3 miles. Well, I'm over 34 miles, and it's still nothing. But this was kind of how it behaved in the past, back when it actually would show me something. It was a little on the optimistic side, so I don't know, we'll give it a few more miles and see if anything drops, but maybe it'll start to go down after like 40, 45 or so.
12 seconds later.
Looks like I spoke just a little too soon. 36.9 miles, and now I'm showing 5 out of 4 bars. Well, just as I hit 104 miles, I hit my last bar, went from 2 bars to 1. So still a little on the inaccurate side, but I guess that's as accurate as it's going to be with a floaty on a stick. But I think it's safe to say that everything is successful and working now. I still have no idea how it got to be that way in the first place, but it's fixed now, and hopefully it will stay that way. See you next time.